How's everyone, all right? Yes. Excellent. What a beautiful place Taupo is. The first time here. Took a taxi down to the town earlier this morning, and it's absolutely beautiful, as we know, so I'll definitely be coming back. So thanks, Leslie, for inviting me. Do appreciate it. It's always great to be here. This is my favourite gig of the year. I probably say that every time I speak, but it really is. You really, as an industry, are wonderful people, and I mean that sincerely. I'd also like to thank Leslie for giving me probably the most difficult task I've ever had to do at this particular event, because she's asked me to talk about the future. Now, the future is actually fraught with danger, and some of you may already be aware that 2 or 3 years ago I spoke about the phenomenal growth of Russia and Brazil and Turkey, and how they were going to excel into the future. I mean, you could never really have predicted what's gone on in the last sort of couple of years. So as I say, predicting the future is really sort of challenging stuff. Last year, in October, we held the inaugural PARTA Global Insights Conference. And this conference is lofted on the TIA 2025 tourism plan. And we had an amazing lineup of speakers. And one of the speakers that we had was an award-winning author, and I'm pleased to say a good friend of mine, a guy called Rick Antonsen, who spoke about cathedral thinking. And it really was an amazing, spellbinding presentation. And what he was saying is that we need to think beyond the usual 2, 3, 5-year periods that we do. Now, we know everything changes instantly these days, but there is still a need for us to project and look forward into the future so we understand, or at least have an idea, of what might happen. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some cathedral thinking, but I'm going to do it on a huge scale. And we're going to be looking at maybe 20 or 30 years into the future. What do we know about the future? Well, we know it's about new ideas, it's about innovation. It's about new technologies and design. It's about, more importantly, thinking beyond tomorrow. Maybe something like this.
Space, a final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
So why Star Trek? Well, Star Trek's pretty interesting. In fact, the whole idea of science fiction, movies, books, TV series, have had a massive impact on our daily lives today. I'll show you what I mean. Back in 1966, when Star Trek began, James Kirk had one of these things. It was some kind of communication thing. It's widened out a bit there for some reason. We didn't get it until 1973. In 1987, Picard had a tablet. We didn't get it till 2010. In 1988, multi-video conferencing. We got it in 2008. And then in 1998, this guy got one of them, whatever that is, and Google produced this in 2013. So you can see that the ideas that some of these guys have when they're creating movies and books and films and all that kind of stuff really does have an impact on the way technology will function in the future. So, is space the future of our industry? Well, maybe, to some degree. I'm sure when Richard Branson gets the Virgin Galactica flying and orbiting around the planet, it will start a new paradigm in our industry. And of course, just like everything else in our industry, it will naturally develop. And it will start to have new ideas and new product available to people. Maybe we'll get a hotel on the moon. Who knows? I'm not quite sure if it'll be a Marriott, but we might have. But this is not a new idea. This is not a new idea at all. Back in 1973, cathedral thinking at its best, Hilton announced they would have a lunar hotel. They were convinced that they would have a lunar hotel. And they signed people up. People could make a booking, and they got a commemorative key when they made that booking, which are very collectible these days. What was really interesting is they had an opening date, and they invited people to the launch of the hotel. It opened last year on the July 19th. And people would meet at the space station in Greenwich in London, and they would be transported to the moon. Do you know what really makes me laugh about this? The dress code was smart casual. You're going to the moon, for Christ's sake. So you can see that, you know, these kind of ideas have been around for a while. So maybe if we did see a lunar hotel, maybe it would look something like this, you know, or maybe it would look something like this. And if you recognise the guy in the background, and I'm sure you do, he's convinced that this hotel will be on the moon within his lifetime. So it's not an idea that doesn't have some kind of credibility. So what will the future look like? What will it be? Well, in the 50s they thought it'd look like this. Looks a bit like Los Angeles Airport to me. Maybe it'll look like this in the future. Or maybe it'll look like this. Or like this. Or like this. Or all of the above. Do we really know? So let's have a look and see. Let's walk through or walk into the light and get a look at what we really do think the world will look like in the next 10, 20 or 30 years' time. The one thing that we need to seriously consider is massive population growth. And you might think to yourself, well, what the hell's that got to do with tourism? But that's got everything to do with tourism, because it's got everything to do with how this planet has to prepare for what's coming. In 2020, it's estimated there'll be 7.5 billion people living and breathing on this planet. By 2050, it's estimated to be about 9 billion people. That's a significant growth. And of course, they have to be watered and fed and accommodated and what have you. And that takes significant planning and investment. It's all about infrastructure. And of course, our industry is lofted on infrastructure. And our future planning and our future ideas are lofted on infrastructure, what's available and what can be done. This is quite interesting that last year, PricewaterhouseCoopers issued a report looking at infrastructure investment for the next 5 years. So this is to 2020. What it said is that 29% of investment in infrastructure would be in roads. Water would be 20%, and of course water is going to be huge in the future. Rail, 8%. Ports, 1%. Power, 21%. Telecommunications, 17%. And airports, 4%. Now the interesting thing about this is that every single part of this that I'm showing you, of what was in their report, our industry is absolutely dependable on. We depend on all of this, and if we don't have one or all of them, we'd fall over. They put a bill, or they put a price tag for this. They said it was going to cost $57 trillion. That's $57 trillion over a 5-year period. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm talking about millions and billions and trillions, they all kind of sound the same. They don't really resonate with just how big it is. So I'm going to give you a little mental exercise, which I've done before, and that is if you take away 1,000,000 seconds away from today, you end up with about 9 days. If you take 1 billion seconds away from today, you end up with 33 years. So the difference between 1,000,000 and 1 billion is huge. So what about a trillion? Well, let's remind ourselves what $1 trillion looks like. Here's a $100 bill. We're all familiar with that. And of course, a dollar bill is about that thick, paper thin. Here's $10,000. It's looking a bit better. Here's $1 million. Doesn't look very much, does it? But I'm sure none of us would knock it back. Here's $100 million. Here's $1 billion. And here's $1 trillion. And there's your man in his red shirt. $57 trillion to be invested in infrastructure over the next 5 years. That is enormous when you think about it. When we look at global GDP, again, just to give you some context of what we're talking about, it's widened out a bit here, and I don't know why that's happening, but if you looked at last year, that says the GDP, global GDP last year was $74 trillion. Okay, and we're talking about $57 trillion being invested over 5 years. So think about that, and then think about 9 billion people on the planet, and think about what's going to be required to actually cope with that. The other thing is urban population growth. And when we look at urban population growth, every single region on the planet is going to experience significant urban population growth. In fact, it's predicted by 2050, 70% of all people on the planet will live in cities. Now, Morris mentioned earlier about the Industrial Revolution, and of course, it's a natural thing. When you start to see the economies of a region or a city or a country or whatever grow, people will naturally be drawn to that because they want to better their lives, they want to earn more, they want to improve their conditions. So 70% of people will live in cities by 2050. So we're going to have more of this, lots more of this, and this, lots more of this, and that. So things are going to change quite dramatically in a very short period of time. What happens is people flood to these cities, and often the cities can't cope. So you get urban sprawl. And it usually happens in the poorest parts of the world. So when a city can't cope, you'll find townships and ghettos sprawling up. The other thing that happens is emerging satellite cities. Now, again, we're starting to see this in different parts of the world. 3 weeks ago, I was in a place called, I think it was called Qingdongnam in the Guizhou province of China. I was speaking at an event there, and I was fascinated, absolutely fascinated, that in this place there were thousands of apartment blocks that were completely empty. Now, you may have seen this reported in the press, that all over China, these townships, these small cities, there are apartments and government buildings and industries all moving to these little townships. And what it is, it's cathedral thinking. It's looking to the future because it knows that the key cities of Shanghai and Guangzhou and Beijing, etc., won't be able to cope. So there's going to be an overspill, an actual overspill. So they can't just move people out of that. They have to move everything. The infrastructure has to be built, the roads, the rails, the industry, everything, and then they can move people en masse. So when you drive through these places, it looks like a catastrophe movie where there's only one person living and everyone else is gone. But in actual fact, it's the reverse. No one's actually lived there yet. It's really quite weird, really quite weird. But this is what's being planned, not just in China, but other parts of the world. The other thing that we're going to see a lot more of is the reclamation of land. Now, this is something, again, that we are familiar with, you know, where we start to build stuff in the water, we start extending the landmass of our own territories. We've seen it. One of the most famous ones was this, the Palm, whatever it's called, in Dubai, you know, where a lot of celebrities bought these apartments and lost a fortune on them. You know, this was done for sort of like aesthetic reasons and to drive the image of Dubai. But what's actually happening more often is this kind of stuff, where cities are now building beyond their city boundaries key infrastructure, like this. This is Hong Kong Airport. They're moving stuff out of the city because as urban population grows and as more people flood to a city, the land that's required for that city is going to become ever increasingly more valuable. So why the hell would you want a big airport or something similar to that in the middle of the city when you can build it over there and build the infrastructure to actually get people to and from that in a very efficient way and use the land that's currently being used as an airport or something similar for population. So you're going to be seeing a lot more of this, and right the way around the world these ideas are now being planted, and people, I've looked at some plans for some of the Asian airports in the future. None of them are actually in cities, they're all beyond. So what is the future plan? Well, let's have a listen. With a bit of luck. No? You should be played before. I'll try it one more time, and if not, I'll talk through it.
So what is the future of cities? Global population is currently more than 7 billion and is predicted to top out around 10 billion. Most of this growth will occur in the urban areas of the world's poorest countries. So how will cities need to change to accommodate this growth? First, the world will need to seek ways to provide adequate food, sanitation, and education for all people. Second, growth will need to happen in a way that does not damage the land that provides us with the goods and services that support the human population. Food production might move to vertical farms and skyscrapers, rooftop gardens, or vacant lots in city centers, while power will increasingly come from multiple sources of renewable energy. Instead of single-family homes, more residences will be built vertically. We may see buildings that contain everything that people need for their daily life, as well as smaller, self-sufficient cities focused on local and sustainable production. The future of cities is diverse, malleable, and creative, no longer built around a single industry, but reflecting an increasingly connected and global world.
Interesting. Vertical farming and agriculture, buildings able to sustain the population who actually live in the buildings. Some of these designs are really quite interesting. This one interests me. Oops, it's getting a bit stuck here. This one. This is an amazing building. And the reason why I've chosen this one is because this building is actually about 2 kilometres from where I live. It's on the edge of Sydney. It's been around for about 3 years. And the vegetation you see on this render, this image, is actually grown phenomenally. I'm not quite saying that I like the look of this building, but the idea about turning a building or having a building have the capacity to sustain the population within is already happening. It's happening in my hometown, and it's happening just down the road from where I live. The other thing, as they say, that needs to happen is communications. Each of these cities, these global cities, and countries and regions and provinces will need to be better connected in the future. Not just from a telecommunications perspective, we'll talk about that in a bit, but from a global transport perspective. And this is where our industry needs to start to think about what it's going to be doing in the future, because it's going to be urban areas, it's going to be roads, shipping, rail, and air. And of course, air travel is huge in our industry. So, let's have a look at the future of flight. This thing here, that might look like it's from Thunderbirds, is actually real. In the late 80s and early 90s, a bunch of engineers, technicians and scientists got together in America and came up with this plan for this amazing aeroplane that flies like a rocket, a bit like the Virgin Galactic. Flies like a rocket into space, uses the stratosphere, then lands in a conventional sense. It was funded by the American government, and then the funds ran out and nothing happened. So these guys literally kept on working in their sheds, in their homes, and collaborating together. And about 2 or 3 years ago, they got renewed funding, and this thing flew. A prototype of this flew mid last year, about a year ago. And the key difference between what Virgin's doing and what this is actually a people transporter. This is an airplane in all this sense. A thing that can fly people from one part of the world to another. This thing here, this is the re-emergence of supersonic aircraft. This thing is scheduled to fly in 2018, and it will. This is the S512. This has got some really cool features. Some very cool features. It doesn't have windows, for a start, because of course windows create drag. And if you want to fly supersonic, any kind of drag is going to slow you down. So what it has is a series of cameras around the fuselage. So when you sit inside it, you have a 3D display of everything that's out there. Now, I'm not particularly fond of heights, and this would freak me out, I've got to tell you. This is not my cup of tea. But I think the idea is really cool. The other thing is that when we look at the future of transport, people are going to be flying a lot more often shorter distances. So they need to create the science behind aviation that's going to make it efficient from the environment perspective and from transport perspective to fly smaller groups of people. This is one design. This is another design by Airbus. Again, they're using new composite materials that are currently being designed. Again, not my cup of tea, but you can see the way the industry is starting to look at the future of our industry. What about drone technology? This is something else that's going to play a major part. But the actual idea of having a couple of blokes in a desert flying me around doesn't really inspire me, I have to say. But if I was FedEx or DHL, I reckon this would be a goer. So you can see that all these kind of ideas have potential in our industry. And what about airships? You know, will we see the return of the airships? Look at this. This is the Airlander. And yeah, there's some benefits there. Well, this thing here rolled out for the first time, not last Sunday, the Sunday before. It's currently on the ground in an airfield in southern England, undergoing tests before it takes flight. And airships have amazing potential, not only for the environment of the planet, but the loads that they can take are huge. And not only that, they don't need runways. They can land just about anywhere. In fact, they can even land in the ocean, just like I've been saying. So you can build airports and have these things landing offshore and then transporting people in, just like a conventional airport that's been built on reclaimed land. Roads are going to play a significant part in our industry in the future, but we need to consolidate roads because they need to be efficient. Roads need to be increasingly efficient with the volume of traffic and with population growth. Of course, we're familiar already with driverless cars. You know, some are working better than others. But we're going to see high-speed cars, where you would get in these things and you would be on highways, on superhighways, that are built to actually transport a whole myriad of different transport systems. Not just road, but rail and trucks and freight. And they will go at different speeds and they'll all be automated. So we won't have to drive them, they will just literally commute together themselves. We'll also see smart roads, and this will become something that will be very familiar around the world. This road here uses a thing called dynamic paint. So what it does is they paint the road surface, and the paint reacts to temperature. So if it drops below zero, you can see that there's ice on the road, or the road is wet. So you can actually start to plan the way you drive and be cautious just because of this dynamic paint. Also, solar highways. These are something else that's quite cool, where the road is actually controlled by a form of solar energy. And literally, the deer is in the headlights here, as you can see, because if something steps out onto the road, it's illuminated, so you can see it in the distance. So you can see that these are some very, very cool ideas. And these, whether you think they're far-fetched or not, will become part of our lives and our industry, whether we like it or not. The other big thing is rail. Rail is becoming massive around the world, and there's already plans for an interconnected global rail network. Now this is a cool map. I haven't quite worked out how they're going to actually get a train across the Atlantic or across the Indian Ocean. I mean, that's for someone else smarter than me to figure that one out. But again, this is already happening. So in Europe, they've got the Connecting Eurasia high-speed rail networks that are coming to fruition. So they're linking high-speed rail to combat some of the emissions from aviation and what have you. And this is very efficient stuff. You don't have to necessarily go through 3 hours of security and what have you. Border control is a lot easier and faster. So you can see again how different parts of the world are starting to plan. So we're familiar with speeds of 500 plus miles an hour. But what about stuff beyond that? Well, this is the Tesla Hyperloop by SpaceX. And this thing is pretty amazing. It's a tubular train, for want of a better phrase, that runs literally within a tube over ground. It'll go at around 800 kilometers an hour. So it's literally like a bullet. It's faster than the speed of sound. And you will sit 2 by 2, and this thing will fly literally in a tube between points. The first one that they've got planned is San Francisco to Los Angeles. And you'll be able to do that in 30 minutes. Now that's a 6-hour journey by car. It's probably a 6-hour journey by plane these days. But this thing, you know, is going to literally, like a bullet, take you between points. And it's not just Los Angeles to San Francisco. They're looking at a whole network within North America. And I'm sure once that technology emerges and is proven, then we'll start to see it in other parts of the world, like India and China and Europe. And it'll become normality for some people. The other thing that I'm not going to show here is this kind of technology is also being looked at to get people from one side of a city to another, and also from airport infrastructure maybe to a marine port. So you can start to see that these short, sharp tubes, and underground, a lot of them, will fire people into different areas where you need to be very quickly. The other part of our industry that is excelling, in fact it's the fastest growing sector of our industry, is the cruise industry. Again, not my cup of tea. It's not the kind of thing I would look to do. But some of the ideas that are out there now for the future are really quite interesting. There's plans to potentially build whole resorts, not just a pool on a deck, but hotels and casinos and all that infrastructure on a floating platform that will cruise around the ocean. Again, not my cup of tea. But this might be, if I was going to do a cruise. This is kind of my style. I'd be able to find the bar. I could do this kind of thing, you know. Or maybe we'd go below the waves. Maybe we'll start cruising below the ocean. And you might think this is a little bit far-fetched, but it's not. You know, Carnival Cruises are already got renders out there looking at this right now. And if Carnival Cruises are doing it, you can bet your life that every other major cruise company in the world is looking at this. Or maybe you'll do both. Maybe you'll swim in the pool on top of the surface, and when it's time for dinner, you'll go below the ocean waves and cruise around looking at the fish and all that other stuff, coral and what have you, and then come back up for breakfast in the morning. I don't know. This is the way they're thinking. Or how about this? I love this idea. How cool is this? Now I'd do this kind of cruising. So, again, you can see how our industry is going to be changed just by technology. And this is just one area. These are just, you know, areas that are already being spoken about and planned for the future. Ports and marine technology, of course, to go with cruising is very important. So we are seeing trillions of dollars being invested in ports right the way around the world, and new technology. One of the big advances will actually be interconnected air and marine ports. Now this makes commercial sense, to have a runway right next to a port. You know, absolute sense. So again, this is stuff, and actually I got this slide from Boeing, because this is the way they're looking. You know, this is the way they're planning. So, you know, these kind of technologies are really starting to come to fruition. And this is another one where it's not even on land. This is right in the middle of the ocean, where boats or ships can connect and passengers can deep board, or whatever you call it, get off, that's what I call it, and get on again. I don't actually know what this does, but this is the way they're thinking, you know. I don't know all the answers. So the one thing that gets me about this is if you do get off, where do you go? I haven't quite worked that out, but there you go. I'm sure someone's thinking about that problem right now. But the real thing that we've spoken about already today, and the thing that's going to drive the most change in our lives is global connectivity through technology, through, you know, the applications that we've got, through the technology that we have, the ability to communicate with people right the way around the world in different means, different mediums, different ways, things that we haven't even thought of. You know, here's a smartphone. Now, 10 years ago, well, I'll rephrase that. Every person in this room, every single one of us, has something in their pocket or something in their bag that we could not have even thought of 10 years ago. Now, whether that's a smartphone, whether it's a USB stick, whether it's a tablet, whatever it is, every single one of us has got something we had never even considered. So think about this when we start to plan in the future, because this is going to change. You know, the new phones are going to look a bit like this. There'll be bracelets, most of them, this next generation. So they'll either pull out like this, or they'll project an image onto your clothes or onto your flesh, and you'll be able to operate it like this. It's also predicted by 2025 that this technology will become virtual. It'll become three-dimensional, and you will operate it in a virtual sense, like a hologram. How cool is that? Because the other thing it does is it allows us to then market in a completely different way that we've not even considered. So you could market a product or a destination or a whole range of different things in a 3D sense. And of course, if you've got a Bentley, a driverless Bentley like this, you'll have one in the middle. So you can see how all this is going to influence us in our industry in the future. Or maybe they'll just plant a chip in their head, and I know a few people that could do with one of them. I think Donald Trump could do with a few, I reckon. But enough about him. He's getting enough exposure. So, all this is going to be made possible, of course, by the communication satellite. And again, we're very familiar with this. Does anybody recognize this guy? Anyone know who he is? I heard somebody say it, and if I had a prize to give you, I'd give you a prize, but I haven't. So this is Arthur C. Clarke, an absolutely amazing, amazing visionary. You might know him because he wrote a book called The Sentinel. That was turned into a movie called A Space Odyssey, 2001: Space Odyssey, another amazing film. But he was the guy that came up with the concept of the communication satellite. And in 1962, the first communication satellite that was able to receive signals and send signals was launched. And the BBC asked him to do an interview, as we would call it today, and to predict the future in 30 to 50 years' time. So I'm kind of going back to the future here, because I'm going to show you this video. I'm going to show you part of it. Because this is what this man thought the world would be like in our lifetime. It's quite sobering.
Trying to predict the future is a discouraging, hazardous occupation, because the prophet invariably falls between two stools. If his predictions sound at all reasonable, you can be quite sure that in 20 or at most 50 years, the progress of science and technology has made him seem ridiculously conservative. On the other hand, if by some miracle a prophet could describe the future exactly as it was going to take place, his predictions would sound so absurd, so far-fetched, that everybody would laugh him to scorn. This has proved to be true in the past, and it will undoubtedly be true, even more so, of the century to come. The only thing we can be sure of about the future is that it will be absolutely fantastic. So, if what I say now seems to you to be very reasonable, then I'll fail completely. Only if what I tell you appears absolutely unbelievable have we any chance of visualizing the future as it really will happen. But what about the city of the day after tomorrow, say the year 2000? I think it will be completely different. In fact, it may not even exist at all. Oh, I'm not thinking of the atom bomb and the next Stone Age. I'm thinking of the incredible breakthrough which has been made possible by developments of communications, particularly the transistor and, above all, the communication satellite. These things will make possible a world in which we can be in instant contact with each other, wherever we may be, where we can contact our friends anywhere on Earth, even if we don't know their actual physical location. It will be possible in that age, perhaps only 50 years from now, for a man to conduct his business from Tahiti or Bali just as well as he could from London. In fact, if it proves worthwhile, almost any executive skill, any administrative skill, even any physical skill, could be made independent of distance. I am perfectly serious when I suggest that one day we may have brain surgeons in Edinburgh operating on patients in New Zealand. When that time comes, the whole world will have shrunk to a point, and the traditional role of the city as a meeting place for men will have ceased to make any sense. In fact, men will no longer commute, they will communicate. They won't have to travel for business anymore, they'll only travel for pleasure.
I found that fascinating when I first saw that. To think, way back then, that this is how the world was going to go. It's incredible, because he got just about all of it right. We still haven't got to some of the places that, that he spoke about. But look at this, the communication satellite. This was an image that was put together last year by NASA. And this shows the amount of satellites and space junk that's orbiting the Earth right now. I'm kind of sure that you probably never thought about this issue, or that it would become such an issue. So already we're starting to go beyond the bounds of our own planet. And we already have 3 communication satellites around the moon. And NASA and others, India in particular, are looking at Mars for the next generation of communication satellites. You know, he just said that if what I say today sounds reasonable, then I've failed. So you could argue that what I've said today is very reasonable because it's already out there. So I've failed. Because really, it's about planning for stuff we don't really know. So I'm going to leave you with a quote by Arthur C. Clarke, because I think it's really poignant, not just for our industry, but for the planet. He says, the only way to discover the limits of the possible is to venture beyond them into the impossible. And that, I think, is probably the future of our industry. Thanks.